It is now 6:08. I'd like to call this Jacksonville Planning Advisory Board regular meeting to order. At this time, if you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance delivered by Nick and invocation by Dr. Hassan.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our bowed heads. Lord, just thank you for it's been an amazing day and just a great place to live here in Jacksonville. And as we come together as a advisory board, we just put aside any personal differences we might have on different topics, and we're just always looking out for our community that you have graciously given to us, and you've asked us to take good care of our citizens here. And as we move through the meeting tonight, you give us the wisdom as we make some advice that goes on up eventually to City Council. And once again, we're just we're so thankful for the community we live in and how we're here to serve other people and serve you and give you all the glory and praise. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen.
God's neat.
Well, I'm sure you all have your agenda in front of you now, so if you'll take a look at that. If there are no corrections, a motion to approve the agenda is in order.
So moved, sir.
Motion by Bob, second. Second by Dr. Hassan. Any discussion? All those approve of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. Those opposed, same. Motion passes. You've got the minutes in front of you. Take a look at them. If there are no corrections, a motion would be in order.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, motion by Matt Ray to approve the minutes as presented. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second from Chase. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, like. Motion passes. City Council update, and it says no items to report, so can we just skip that? Okay, and no old business. We'll go right to new business. Jeremy, I think you're up.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Special use permit.
Agenda item 1 is a special use permit and type 3 site plan for 1210 Country Club Road. Before you on the screen is the aerial photography of the location. This is the city's latest copy of the aerials, but I can assure you this site is already developed. It is home to a 6,000 square foot office building. It was just finished last year. And the owner, Philip David, has submitted a special use permit and type 3 application to request approval to add personal services establishment as an allowable use at this site. Property is zoned office and institutional, and within this zoning district, personal services establishment is a special use permit or requires a special use permit. It is surrounded to the west, east, and south by property zoned O&I as well, and directly across Country Club Road by properties zoned corridor commercial. The county land use plan is very similar to the zoning in the area, with office identified for this property, regional commercial for those properties across Country Club Road. Personal services establishment is an establishment engaged in the provision of frequent or recurring needed services of a personal nature. Examples include laundry, dry cleaning, drop-off establishments, photo studios, mailing or packing service, photocopy and blueprint services, hair, tanning, your barbershops, your beauty shops, yoga, martial arts studios. All those similar uses fall under that one use, specific use. It is its own use category and use. Before you use the site plan for the site, as required by our ordinance, a type 3 site plan has to be submitted with special use permits. Again, this is an existing site, is currently built and operating, and this would personal services establishment would allow that use to occupy any of the units they have on site. Personal services establishments parking is less requirement than office, so it should not create any additional parking issues for the site. And with all that being said, the staff advises the Planning Advisory Board to recommend the City Council approval of the special use permit in the type 3 site plan based on findings of fact A through G being found in the affirmative, and that the request will add an additional use for the area. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
There's already a building over there, there's a law firm, isn't it, right?
Well, it is in one of the units, and there's 3 other units that could be occupied.
Okay, so that's in that space between the Walgreens and the project site?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. There's a building here.
Does this create any conflicts with the existing parcels, adjacent parcels, like the 2 medical offices behind it by changing?
No, it doesn't create any specific use standards. There are no use-specific standards for personal service establishments. It's just identified as a special use in the O&I category. It is already allowed in the corridor commercial zoning district in downtown. However, in neighborhood commercial and O&I, it is listed as a special use, as well as industrial. But looking at it, staff believes that the type of uses that are allowed under a personal services establishment support those type of, the uses that are already allowed by right in the O&I district. Especially when you talk about the shipping and facilities, or barber shops, beauty shops. If you're having lunch, you may step over next door, or the other items that could be allowed under that use.
Mr. Chairman, I do have to ask for a motion to abstain from this vote as a prior client of the landlord.
You got that right? Can we get a motion to recuse Mr. Ray from the
So moved.
discussion? Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Mr. Ray, you are recused. Anything else? Any other questions?
I make a motion, we go ahead and, for approval of the special use permit and site plan based on findings of fact A through G, being in the affirmative.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, motion passes.
I did.
Dick?
Thank you.
Now, does this require, public hearing before city council?
It will go before city council next Tuesday night, and we have a public hearing scheduled. Advertisements have been sent and signs have been placed on the property.
Okay.
And that actually goes for all 3 items tonight. They will be in front of council next week. All 3 will be public hearings.
Okay, number 2, Jeremy, up again.
This is a UDO text amendment for agenda item 2. In an effort not to continually butcher the name, I'm just going to say Capital Growth Incorporated has requested this text amendment that proposes to change the Jacksonville Unified Development Ordinance and specifically to the articles before you on the screen, Articles 4.1, 4.2, 5.1, 9.3, and 9.4. Those are use table, use-specific standards, off-street parking and loading and circulation, use classifications, and definitions respectively. They have requested this through the aforementioned articles of the UDO. That is the issue at hand. Specifically, they are introducing the use of convenience store with made-to-order restaurant with gas sales in parentheses. This, to put it in the board's vision, this would be your Wawas and Sheets of the world, where they have the made-to-order, ready to go. You go in and they've got a large menu of made-to-order food. They have requested that use. They are requesting a change to the parking. Instead of what's allowed for convenience stores, they are proposing to have 1 per every 150 square feet of gross floor area. They are proposing to remove the current convenience store use-specific standard that will treat any convenience store larger than 4,000 square feet as a grocery store, and changing that to now convenience stores larger than 4,000 square feet in size will not include convenience stores with made-to-order food with gas sales, and they should be, and then that will go along with the new definition. I'll go over here in just a second. This is the definition, very similar to a convenience store, but it does talk about the made-to-order. A retail establishment offers for sale primarily the following types of articles: bread, milk, cheese, canned and bottled food and drinks, tobacco products, refer to our recently adopted hookah, vape, and tobacco similar establishments standards, beer, wine, candy, papers, magazines, and general hardware articles. It includes, as a second principal use, a made-to-order restaurant component where indoor and outdoor seating may be provided, which will include a kitchen on-site serving food and beverages to customers. Gasoline is offered for sale only as a secondary activity of the convenience store. With all that being said, I'm sure the board knows that this is timely with the current developments that we are seeing at the staff level. And with all that mentioned, staff is recommending that the board recommend approval to City Council, and that this proposed amendment is consistent with the adopted Campbell Land Use Plan, Policy 38.2. The development regulations revise the development regulations to be responsive to innovative development proposals and existing conditions. The amendment is reasonable and is in the public's interest. Again, staff is recommending approval with the aforementioned said. Staff and representatives of the client are in attendance and be happy to answer any questions the board may have. So again, to summarize, they are requesting to amend the parking standard from 200 square feet to its own specific one space per 150 square feet, a new use identification, and to change the use-specific standards to exclude them from exclude a convenience store serving that has a made-to-order aspect to it with gas sales to not be also considered a grocery store. It would be their own use.
Wouldn't that be something like a Which or something?
I mean, that may be, you know, that
I mean, sort of, kind of.
you know, we do have a lot of gas
Yeah,
stations that have a
use of
restaurant
gas.
in them, but knowing the reasons this was triggered, I used the Wawa and the Sheets as examples.
Does this have any bearing on like the existing or in the future, like a Subway that wanted to be in a convenience store?
They would have to adjust their parking standards accordingly.
Yeah, that's one reason why we work with the applicant versus just changing the standards of parking ratios and the definition. We felt it would be best to kind of delineate two different types of convenience stores, or three technically, but one with gas sales, one without gas sales, and then one with gas sales with a made-to-order restaurant, so that we didn't create nonconformities. That's why this was done this way versus kind of going in a different direction. So we factored that into the equation. We didn't want to create those nonconformities. So this wouldn't impact a convenience store with gas sales that doesn't have any restaurant indoors.
But we do have some that do. I mean, unless I miss my guess, the one at the intersection of Henderson and
With the Subway, yeah, the
Western.
Exxon with the Subway, that would now be under this with the full-service restaurant.
So it would make them non-conforming?
Well, we'd have to analyze to see whether they have adequate parking or not.
this is more restrictive on parking, correct? This
No,
requires,
this requires more parking.
that's what I mean. This will require more parking.
Yeah, so if they don't have enough, they could have a non-conforming site feature at that location with not enough
What
parking.
would happen to them?
Nothing. They'd become they'd have a non-conforming site feature. So not nothing, but they won't have to go and do something tomorrow.
Yeah.
If they go to do an expansion, they may not be able to do the expansion because they don't have adequate room. But there's also other provisions that come into play as well that they could utilize.
Why do we need to necessarily make this a parking situation? Could we keep the current one parking space per 200 square foot and go ahead and approve, I guess, everything else in this? I'm sorry, did that question make sense?
No, it does.
Okay.
I think that goes against with a convenience store with a full-service restaurant, the the information provided by the applicant demonstrates they have a higher need of parking spaces compared to a convenience store without a full-service restaurant. Because you have people there getting gas, you have people there getting convenience, then you have a whole nother group that you may go there with not trying to get gas without trying to go into the convenience store aspect. You want to go get dinner. So they need more parking than your typical convenience store needs. So if you were not to reduce, or if you weren't to, you did not increase the amount of parking, that doesn't achieve the goal that they want to provide more parking.
But it currently doesn't restrict it either if it was at the 200.
No, it does. We have a maximum of 150%.
Okay.
So if they are required, 5 per thousand, and they want to provide 5 per thousand, so let's say that they're 6,000 square feet. Anybody do quick math? So 5 times, so 30 spaces. They can do 45 spaces, and that's where they're capped. Anybody's eligible for that now. If they want to provide more than that, they're unable to do so, unless they go through a parking demand study. They want to be able to provide more parking for their patrons, and the UDO establishes, when you have a situation like this, we could consider it as an unlisted use. The ordinance allows us to have already made that decision. There's a caveat, and it's in Article 9. There's a caveat to it, that if this is going to be something that's going to resurface more time than like just a one-time event, then we need to bring it forth for a text amendment. Well, we would envision more than one Wawa site coming to town, and we already have others that are similar situations. The Witch Rich example is not in our jurisdiction, but I think it's a good example nonetheless. The Exxon Subway is an example. The Wendy's Speedway at the corner of Western and Gum Branch would be another. So we already have these. We just don't have them defined in our use table, in our definitions, and that's what this is attempting to address.
So in essence, it's creating a better standard because they are kind of two uses within the same, so you would require more parking.
That's correct.
Good.
Yeah, okay, and to add on to what Ryan is saying is, we do not currently have this type of use identified, so we may even have to fall back on the ordinance where it says you can take a building and divide it up into its two different uses. In our restaurant parking, let's just, for example, you got a gas station this side and a full restaurant like the one at the Newton Grove interchange on I-40. If you've ever been there, they've got a full-blown McDonald's and a gas station. Well, that restaurant requires one space per 100 square feet per our ordinance. This actually finds your compromise. It brings them together. You get 200 for the convenience store or the 100 for a restaurant, and this proposes 150 in between.
I think another example, the Wendy's Speedway example, they could close down the Wendy's at 10 o'clock tonight, and that's a separate and distinct land use compared to the convenience store to the right. So this would be kind of a meet in the middle as far as the parking.
So currently, Wendy's, for example, does not, they have a different land use than the gas station does next door.
Yeah, without doing, yeah, correct. Yes, sir.
But then if we put this into effect, then it will create a nonconformity for them?
They'll now be an identified use, and without doing a parking count on there, we do not know if they would comply or not. I know those sites do have a lot of parking as they stand, but I do not know specific counts.
And given that the Wendy's is a standalone land use, that there's a door that they could close down the Wendy's and not reopen, that's the two extinct land uses. So I don't know that I would even put, that's like a multi-tenant building, the gas station, convenience store on the right, restaurant on the left. So I would argue that that's two separate and distinct land uses. What this model would be is where you have it all in one. There's not split units. This is one open use that has a full-service restaurant, convenience store. It's all in one. It's not divided into more than one unit. So we can't say for sure that the Wendy's will be non-conforming because I think they're under a different parking standard than what this would be.
How about like Circle K on Marine Boulevard that has a made-to-order menu currently? Don't they have a restaurant inside?
To my knowledge, that's
I don't
not
think
a
they're made to order.
made-to-order restaurant. That's okay from what I understand is different.
Yeah, theirs is all prepared, and
You
you
just pick it
go
up,
pull it off the
take it.
shelf, so to speak.
Okay.
But not much very different from the Speedway and their hot dog stand.
The mystery meat. Yeah, I think Chase is where I was headed in my mind is we don't want to negatively impact an existing customer or existing business in the community. What's unique about this is we've got somebody coming forward willingly adding some restriction or some extra parking spaces, recognizing the need. So it's a unique spot for us to look at here.
Okay.
Ryan or Jeremy, can I ask, is there a way to maybe avoid the parking situation for this use? Like not put a cap on how much parking they could have?
You actually just read my mind. I was going to say that prior to the UDO, we did not have it was, at the time the UDO was adopted, it was 125%. So pre-UDO, you could have as much parking as you wanted to. When the UDO was adopted, it was kept at 125, and because of restaurant uses, ironically enough, I believe it was John Pearson Associates submitted a text amendment, probably on behalf of a client, to bump the maximum to 150, and also to change the parking requirement for restaurants to basically 10 per thousand. And that's the standard, right, 10 per thousand? So we've already kind of made some of those adjustments, but from a planning standpoint, your planning staff's not going to recommend that you be able to have, an indefinite amount of parking just because of the balances that you have with, the pollution that goes along with it, stormwater runoff, thermal pollution, all of those items. I mean, we look at what the ordinance requires, we look at IT numbers, industry standards, and then if somebody has a unique situation, they can request a parking demand study. So there's provisions that allow people to go through and get above that maximum if they can prove a need through an engineer study. This is a situation where we have a new land use that we really don't have many of, and I think we're going to see this more in the future, and we felt that it was best to bring forth an amendment versus doing the one-off as far as just we're not going to see this again. We think we are going to see it again. And the applicants felt strongly enough about doing that to where they actually made the application to make the request.
Is there any other cities or different places we could use as sort of like a guideline, like Greenville or Wilmington or something like that, where what do they have in play?
We'd have to look at that. We don't have that information for us available right now. Mr. Chairman, I know that it's up to the board anytime we have members of the public and/or the applicants. It's not a public hearing tonight, but if the board would like to hear from the applicants or one of the representatives, I mean, maybe they can shed some information that we weren't able to provide if you wanted to ask questions or let them provide that information to you tonight.
And I also think it's important to note that no matter what happens tonight, it goes next week before city council, which means there's a chance that city council may say the same thing that Chase said, or they may say that, we want to go ahead and change it. So I'm not saying that it's not a good idea to bring up something tonight, but it's not going to be the end anyway. It's just going to be our recommendation. And so it's your choice. Go ahead. I think you have to tell us who you are.
Yes, I'll keep my comments brief. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Clint Cogburn. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm Ward & Smith with offices at 82 Patton Avenue in Asheville, North Carolina. It's good to be down from the mountains and here closer to the coast, and I appreciate the chair and the board allowing me to speak really briefly. This was a text amendment that was initiated by my client, Capital Growth Buckhalter, which is a preferred development partner with Wawa convenience stores. Wawa, Sheetz, Royal Farms, and other convenience made-to-order restaurant-style businesses are starting to come into North Carolina in higher numbers. And you're seeing that, I think, predominantly actually in the eastern part of the state. It is starting to move to the middle and western part of the state, but those uses are becoming predominant in the convenience store market. You're seeing a lot of convenience stores that have that made-to-order component as part of their business model for a number of reasons, including economic and profit-motivated factors. And so in looking at the ordinance, we worked with staff, and my client worked with staff over a number of months to see what the options may be, because these types of developments do require more parking than your traditional convenience store. That is just from a practical standpoint, when you have individuals who are going in for gas, who are going in for typical convenience store items, and then those who are going in to get a bite to eat or to get something for lunch or dinner, or a combination of all three of those, that necessitates additional parking. And so we talked with Ryan and Jeremy extensively, discussed a number of options, looked at a number of options, including potentially changing the parking table for convenience stores altogether, looking at other ways to address this issue. And what we landed on is the text amendment in front of you. The reason that this is the language that we landed on is because it is as minimally impactful to the ordinance as possible. In this, even though there are a number of sections that are amended, what you will see is that essentially all we are doing is creating a new use category with that made-to-order component, and then meeting in the middle between what restaurants allow and what the traditional convenience stores allow for parking at that one space per 150 square feet. In terms of other aspects of convenience stores or convenience store use standards, where those types of uses are permitted in the permitted use table, what we're proposing here remains the same. So other than changing this parking ratio, these will not be treated any differently than traditional convenience store locations. And we did that specifically to make sure that it was minimally impactful. We did not want to have a number of non-conforming uses. We believe that we've addressed that with Ryan and Jeremy as part of this process. And so that's why we are here today. That's why we've chosen this language. I know that it's a little confusing when you look at it in totality, but we would submit to the board a very minimal change to the ordinance just to provide some flexibility from a parking standpoint for this new type of use that is coming into the city of Jacksonville. I have two members of my team here with me as well. We have Alvin Hood, who's a director of construction for Capital Growth, and then Payman Nadimi, who's with Wawa. We're happy to answer questions that the board may have, but we appreciate your consideration. We do believe that this is an appropriate change and would ask that you recommend approval to council.
Thank you. Ryan?
So I just pulled up the tax card and of the Exxon Subway example, because I think that's the closest one. The square footage per the Honolulu County tax card is 4392. Based on the current standards of 1 to 200, that would be 22 spaces. At 1.5 times, that's 33. They have about 43 to 44, 45 spaces on site, so they're already non-conforming. This amendment would actually bring them into compliance closer than what it currently is. So it would actually be doing them a favor as it relates to that particular land use where it's wide open. The Subway blends into the convenience store, blends into the Subway, versus the Wendy's example where it's split in half. So I think that this amendment would actually be more beneficial to them than making it worse, just for what that's worth.
And I think that's probably true in most of the places that I frequent like that, but I didn't want to go out on a limb, but thanks for looking that up.
Yep, very good.
Yeah, and I think that's always great questions. I mean, how's this going to negatively impact other folks? And we try to look at that and make sure that we're not going to do that. But I will also remind the board that, you know, ordinances are living, breathing documents, and as things change, it's inevitable that over time, things are going to create nonconformities. I mean, one sign ordinance rewrite could, setback changes, buffer yard standards. I mean, all of those things, you're going to create nonconformities with that change. So I think we should consider all things, but I mean, in our world, we try to not create nonconformities, and in fact, I can tell you, I think, as the applicants would attest, I think the original request they were looking to go, we were like, yeah, but we're worried about this, and that's how we developed this standard, because we didn't want to create those non-conforming situations. But we don't always necessarily think of all the different scenarios, but we try to.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any other discussion? It's up to you guys.
I'll make the motion. We go ahead and approve this text amendment request. And down in attachment A.
Sounds good. Do we have a second?
I'll
We have
second
a
that.
second. Bob,
I
second.
was wondering how to word that.
You did very well. Any other discussion?
Short and sweet.
Took less time than the discussion. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, like. Motion passes. Thank you very much. You might as well just stay the week, and then, you know, by the time you drive back and come back again, it'll be city council time.
It's very tempting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Okay, agenda item 3. Ryan, you're up. Jeremy gets a break. Where'd all our people go?
Yeah.
Not that you're not people.
You want to get something made to order?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I was too busy making noise.
You're okay. You're good.
So these new mics, they're very sensitive. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, planning board members. Item 3 before you tonight is another text amendment. This is a staff-initiated request. It's pertaining to Articles 4.1 use table and 4.2 use specific standards, warehouse and freight movement use category. And this is a category, as you can imagine, that we don't see a lot of requests for. And recently we had some requests that came in that caused us to begin to look at the use table and the use standards, and the question was raised, and we looked at it and we're like, this is interesting. This doesn't make sense, what's in the UDO. It basically referenced in the use table, and so we believe it's an error. But let me show you the next slide. And as a result, we analyzed the full section. But if you look at the parcel services, and that slip sheet page that I added, it's not on the slide. So you're going to want to refer to your last 2 pages in the amendment. I need to change the PowerPoint. But basically, parcel services is the only warehouse and freight movement classification that currently in Article 4.2 use, additional use specific standards, it's the only one listed with the exception of cold plant storage, which is a whole totally different use standards. So out of all these 5 uses, only, I think there's 5, let's see, 5 uses, cold storage plant, the use standards are found in E4B, and then parcel services is found in E4B. No other uses, I'm sorry, outdoor storage as a principal use is under E4A, and then parcel service is the only one that has under E4B. None of the other uses have to meet the standards that are under E4B. I would argue that all of the other uses should be under E4B and the parcel services should not be. So that's kind of what caused us to evaluate this entire section. So as a result of that, we've analyzed the UDO, and we're proposing to the board and city council next week that parcel services And the difference here is the line here that says parcel services now says parcel services under 2,500 square feet. These are the districts we feel that they should be permitted uses within, and they don't have to meet the standards. That's your UPS store, FedEx, the postal annex, things like that. So a business type use, retail establishment, very nice, use within a multi-tenant building. And I'm trying to get to my page here, I apologize. All right, so then the second category would be parcel services greater than 2,500 square feet. And we've got it proposed to be permitted in the business zone or the CC zone and the industrial zone. So this is the location where it could be a bigger square foot type establishment. So we don't want to have that in downtown business necessarily. We don't want to have that in the O&I zones. So we've narrowed down the use area that it could locate. And then under the use specific standards, as you'll see on page 32, that basically we're striking the parcel services from the use specific standards categories. And we are also changing standard 1, which says that the uses within these categories shall be located at least 500 feet from any residential district, except for the RMF LD and the RMF HD zones, schools, or daycare centers. All the other standards would be applicable. With that being said, be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you for your foresight, looking at this and realizing, what changes need to be made. Any discussion before motion's in order?
Yeah, Ryan, so under B, number 1, is number 1 you're saying that's a new item requiring it to be from 500, any residential district, at least 500 feet?
B number 1,
Yes.
currently it states the use shall be located at least 500 feet from any residential district, school, or daycare center. We're proposing to add in the exception part, that we're looking at high-density districts different than your single-family residential districts. So the 500-foot spacing would apply to only the single-family zones, not the RMF and the RMF HD.
So that actually allows for you to be near a residential zone?
A residential high-density zone, yes.
Okay.
Which is a good thing, because I know there are some multifamily places that now have those parcel services within the multifamily community, since they're so large that this would allow for it as well.
And this is for like a UPS store, postal annex, something like that? Is that what this parcel services is pertaining to?
Well, let's see here if I've got the definition. Nope. All right, let me read the definition for you.
The size that,
I had it open earlier, and I always close it down, but it won't take me long to pull it up. Let me read the definition of parcel services. All right, so parcel service is defined as retail sales or business services establishment to facilitate the transmittal and receipt of parcels.
it's almost like a personal service that we talked about earlier this evening.
It could be, or it could be on a bigger scale.
Yeah. I walk in with a box and you send it away for me.
What would you compare that to, like a current business in town? Or is there not one?
The smaller ones, I would say a UPS store, postal annex.
This is just over 4,000, or over 2,500 square feet.
So you might be able to argue that, Kohl's does Amazon returns. Kohl's, Michael's does the same, and so does Staples. That may be an accessory use, but in essence, they're doing parcels. You also could have, so that would be kind of the smaller, but those The UPS store, postal annex, those are the small ones, probably under 2,500 square feet. So we came up with 2,500, that's basically 2 tenant spaces in a typical multi-tenant building. They're usually about 1,200 square feet per unit. So if you take 2 of them, that's a 2,500. That's kind of where we came up with that number. You go larger than that, that could be an accessory use within, or a separate standalone use within a Kohl's, Michael's, or it could be an industrial type facility where it's 100,000 square feet and they receive parcels and then distribute parcels.
Would this have any effect on like the current moving companies in town, like the Troy Humphreys or the, I can't think of the other one right there on Center, or not Center Street, but Belford.
Like what we talked about last time, you know, we did not analyze those existing, but I think the way, they're not, I don't believe they're parcel services. They would be more like a truck or freight terminal, warehouse storage type facility. So I don't believe that this would impact them either way. If it does anything, it would be beneficial because you're allowing it to locate closer than 500 feet from those 2 districts, whereas right now they would not be able to be within 500 feet.
Perfect.
But without, you know, looking at those sites exactly to see what their zone, if there's any RMF, LD, or HD near them, that would be the only way for us to definitively say. But if we were proposing to take 500 feet to 1,000 feet, then, you know, it would be more likely that it could be detrimental to them
Right.
than eliminating some of the 500-foot standard.
Ready for a motion?
Anytime you are. Thank you, Chase.
Oh,
Go for it.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that the planning board recommend approval to its council for the UDO text amendment found in attachment A as presented here this evening.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Nick. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed like, motion passes. I think we're up to reports.
There is no report tonight. Just thank you for being here tonight and helping us conduct our normal monthly business.
Well, you managed to stay with us the whole night. Was this just
You're the only one.
nothing else on TV?
Appreciate your support on.
Oh, wait.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other discussions, any other comments? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion to adjourn has been seconded. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. We are gone. Motion adjourned.
We didn't.